Hey guys, welcome back to another demo video. Today what I'm going to be showing you guys is different types of masking and non-destructive layer adjustments that you can use in Photoshop. And these things are going to come in very handy for your digital collage project, which we're going to most likely be starting pretty quickly here. So pay close attention to this. Layer masks, I find, is something that I constantly have to refresh people's memory on how they work or re-explain how they work. So be sure to take some notes, pay close attention, really sort of ingrain this into your mind. And these are, masks, clipping masks and layer masks are something that you'll find you're going to be using quite often. They're one of the more versatile and useful features of Photoshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to do just kind of an example to give you guys an idea of how these work. So what I've got here is I've got Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. This is one of my favorite paintings. And you guys have probably seen this, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, with the anteater and the heads turned looking at the anteater because the anteater's thrown a lawn chair at the window and smashed it, and just kind of like a funny modification of this painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to mask things out and bring them in so that way you can begin to bring different resources together to create something unique. So this is just an example just to show you how masking works. So what I've got is I've opened in a new layer this image of a kangaroo, and what I want to do is remove the environment from this photograph. So I have just the kangaroo suspended in space, so that way I can take it and drop it into this painting here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how layer masks work. So starting out, I'm going to open my layers panel, and right here I'm going to make a copy of my background. And you can do this either in a document on its own, apply the layer mask, copy it and bring it over, or you can do it right in the painting or your original document itself. Something to be aware of as you're doing this is the resolution. So if we take a look here, say this is my main collage document. This is where I'm bringing all of my image resources into to create my finished piece of art. So what's my resolution right now? I'm going to go to Image and Image Size. Resolution is 1. So something's kind of funny here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to a decent print resolution. So what I want this to actually be is somewhere around 360. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to double check that. On a Mac, Command Option I will pop that window back open pretty quickly. Everything looks good. Now be aware that you can't just go and change your resolution and hope that everything is going to look fine. What I did here was I unchecked resample, so that way as my resolution goes up, you're going to see the physical size is going to go down. And what that's doing is it's increasing the quality of the print, but as a result it has to get smaller physically. So while my pixel dimensions remain the same, my physical properties, physical dimensions go down on this painting. If I leave that unchecked, it's just the opposite. The pixel dimensions go up. That means it's going to be getting blurry. It's going to be getting pixelated. So just be aware of that as you're making these changes. And now I'm going to check my image resource. What is the resolution on this? It needs to match. So what I've got here is it's 72. That's only screen quality. So I'm going to take this up to 360. So I'm left with something that's roughly 4 by 2.5, a little larger. I'm going to click OK. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of this. So Command A to select all. You can see I've got the selection marquee all the way around now. Command C to copy. I'm going to go over to my actual document and I'm going to hit Command V to paste. So that's dropped my image in there. Now this is looking a little too small for me. So what I would do is go back and find a higher resolution image, a larger image in terms of its physical dimensions. But just for the sake of this, I'm going to just enlarge this because this is just going to be a video demo for you guys explaining how these masks work. So there's my kangaroo. It's on its own layer in my document. Now what I need to do is get rid of the environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a layer mask to do that. And the way we do that is to start out, I've got my layer selected. And down here in the layers panel, you're going to see this little square with a circle in it. Kind of looks like a camera from straight on from the front. So I'm going to click on that, and what you're going to see happen is an extra thumbnail is going to be attached to that layer. So now what we have are two different things here. The thumbnail on the left, you can see there's some visual information in there. This contains your photograph, the pixel information in your photograph. If you want to work on the photograph, say you want to paint on the kangaroo, you need to have that thumbnail selected. If you want to show or hide information as a layer mask, you need to have the one on the right selected. So while we can work with the actual pixels in the one on the left, changing color, painting on the kangaroo or the environment, things like that, we can work in color. Over here on the right, the way the mask works is it uses black and white, black to hide information, white to show information. And the levels of gray in between act as transparency. So the more that gray tends towards black, the more transparent it's going to be. So just to show you guys how that works, I've got my mask thumbnail selected on my layer. I'm going to choose my paintbrush. I'm going to set black as my color. I'm going to get myself a decent sized brush here and lower my opacity a bit. So what you're going to see is as I paint and use either full-on black or gray, it's going to either hide or show information. So just painting really lightly here, I'm adding transparency to this. If I were to go full out with just straight black pigment, it's going to hide this. And because I'm using opacity, it's not doing it instantly right away, but you get the idea of how this works. So what I'm going to do is, if I zoom in, what I like to do is I generally ignore all the exterior stuff right off the bat, and I go in and focus on just getting around the object that I'm looking to mask out all set. So as you can see, if I'm painting with black, it's going to hide pixels for me. It's going to hide that visual information. And you can adjust this brush just like any other paintbrush tool. So you can have a nice soft edge on this, you could have some opacity, you can use a textured brush if you want, all those things. And if I were to switch this and paint with white, it's going to bring information back. So painting with black will hide, painting with white will show. And you can see here in my thumbnail for my layer mask, as I'm going through and painting, it's showing the marks that I'm making and adding content to that layer. So while I'm still painting and putting down pixel information, it's not putting it directly onto my kangaroo itself. It's putting it onto this separate layer, which is acting as a filter. It's filtering out all of the extra information that I don't want to use, but it's also retaining it. So if I go too far, say I paint too far and I erase part of the kangaroo's tail or its head, I can just switch to white and go back through and bring that information back. So this is a nice way to sort of come into this, and if you're not really certain you want to commit fully to an entirely masked out part of a photo or an object, something like that, you can mask out just what you want for now. And if later on you decide, say I want to bring the water back in this painting and use it in my finished piece, all you've got to do is come back through and paint with some white to bring that back. And you can even go through and paint with some transparency to sort of get a nice blend or a nice fade in of that information, so it's not so rough and kind of intrusive with a sharp edge or anything like that. So I'm just going to finish this up quick, and we'll move on to the next. And I know I'm missing some spots, but that's okay for our purposes here. Just so I can keep this brief so you guys can jump in and get to work on your projects. Okay, so there's my kangaroo. I might go in and do some cleanup and stuff once I've got them initially masked out, get things looking the way I want them to. And what I can do then is position it, drag it around, move it, things like that. So just by choosing my kangaroo layer here, I can move them around. If I hold down Shift and I click on my layer mask, it will shut it on and off. And if I still want to work on just my kangaroo, if I select that and I say, alright, this kangaroo's got some pretty sweet, racing stripes or something like that, I can come in with my brush, select the actual pixel information thumbnail on that layer, and go through and paint on that information without it actually coming out and showing up outside of my paint area. So if I wanted to, I could just cover this whole kangaroo in white and not have to worry about going outside of the lines, for instance, sort of like working with a coloring book. So that's layer masking. Our next type of masking is called a clipping mask. So the way a clipping mask works is it lets you apply wholesale information on a layer that will rest over top of only the pixels it sees beneath. So for instance, this layer with my kangaroo, if I were to take this and make a copy and then right click on my layer mask and hit apply layer mask, I've committed to what I've masked out, so it's just my kangaroo all on his own, no layer mask. It's him, transparent. He can do, whatever throughout the scene. So now if I, say I want to make this kangaroo tinged kind of a blue-green, make him fit in a little bit more. The way I can do that is with a clipping mask. So I'm going to make a new layer above my kangaroo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to sample some colors from throughout my painting. So with my brush, if I hold down Option, it's going to open up my eyedropper tool where I can then go and sample some colors. So I'm going to sample a few of these colors out of here. And just on this new layer, lay in some color over top of this kangaroo. Okay. And I can apply any sort of layer style like I normally would if you want to, playing around with it. I'm just going to lower the opacity on it a little. So now what I've got is I've got a little bit of that color coming in. I want to apply it just to the kangaroo. I don't want all this extra stuff off to the side. So rather than going through and meticulously erasing all of this, I'm going to use a clipping mask to apply the content just to the shape of the kangaroo. So to do that, I'm going to right click on this layer with the pigment on it, which is above my kangaroo. And I'm going to look through this and I'm going to look for Create Clipping Mask. And I'm going to click on it. So watch what happens when I click on this. It's applied that color just over top of the pixels it can see, the full opacity or transparent pixels it can see of the layer beneath. So this layer with my pigment on it is now resting above my kangaroo, and this little over and down arrow signifies that a clipping mask is applied and it's being applied to the information it sees below. So I'm adding this color to my kangaroo without having to go through and tediously erase all of that extra stuff over it. And also what it allows me to do is it allows me to retain that original information of the kangaroo without going through and painting over it and suddenly deciding, oh, I don't like this, now I've got to go back and mask the kangaroo out all over again. So this is a non-destructive way of altering content within your document. I could now, I've got this layer here, I could just select it, grab my paintbrush, and I could go through and continue to paint and not have to worry about coloring outside of the lines. So this is a really useful feature for you guys, especially if you're bringing stuff in and you want to modify it in some way and change things around. So those are our two methods of masking. Our layer masks and our clipping masks. If you ever need to undo a clipping mask, you can do release clipping mask right here and it will break it away from that. So the other thing that I want to show you guys is, on the subject of non-destructive changes, what I want to show you guys is adjustment layers. So adjustment layers are non-destructive ways of modifying the content of your document. They can be applied wholesale over the whole document itself, or they can be applied to just specific areas. So I could apply, just like I made this clipping mask color change to the kangaroo, I can do the same thing here. So let's say I want to take this painting and do some black and white filtering on it. I can choose black and white filter. And what it's going to do is it's going to pop open this properties box, and I now have the option of dialing this around and making changes to specific pigmentations, how vibrant I want the reds or the yellows or the greens to be. And what that's done is it's added, you can see here, an adjustment layer. It's got a name. It has already appended to it a layer mask. So if I wanted to, I could come through and paint to hide or show information. Or if I wanted to apply this just to a specific object, like the kangaroo, I could just right-click on it and create a clipping mask. So you can see here, just the kangaroo is black and white now. And you can see here, clipping masks can stack. So what I could do is, let's see, I have a gradient map. We'll go with something weird. No, maybe not that. How about that? So say I wanted just the kangaroo to look like the way he's looking, but the rest of the painting to remain the same. I'm just going to take that adjustment layer, turn it into a clipping mask. And if I need to go back and make changes to this, I can go back to the properties palette here, or I can double click the little half moon icon, come through, click on my gradient, and make changes as I need to. And all of this happens live, so what you can do is you can come in and dial things around. And you can basically come through and sort of pick and choose colors from the scene and colorize your kangaroo a bit. Then from there you might go through and apply a layer styling of some kind to it, see what it does. Even something as simple as lowering the opacity a bit to make things make sense a little more. So using just these tools, we can sort of take our kangaroo and, on his own, he kind of stands out, doesn't look like he falls into place in the painting quite a bit. But just with the use of clipping masks and being a little creative, we can sort of bring him and get him closer to looking like he belongs in the scene. So just some different ways to alter the painting, alter objects within Photoshop non-destructively so we retain that information. And this will be something that you guys will find very handy for your digital collage. So once again, to review that, you've got layer masks, which can be used with just about any layer, using black and white and the varying grays in between to hide or show information. Those are created using the layer mask icon down here. We've got clipping masks, which are on their own used to apply over top, kind of like a cookie cutter or an overlay to just the pixels they can see underneath. And then we've got our non-destructive layer adjustments right here in this little half moon. And there's quite a few of these, so don't be afraid to experiment and play around with it and see what you can do. These come in real handy for if you're doing some photo editing and don't want to make a permanent change to your photograph just yet. And say I'm happy with the way this kangaroo looks, what I can do is choose the clipping mask and hit merge down underneath this little drop down in my layers palette, making sure that I've got the layer I want to merge selected. Dial that just a little bit backwards. So adjustment layer selected, drop down, merge down, or Command E. So I like the way it looked, so I committed those changes to the kangaroo. There he is. Only other thing I'd be missing is he's kind of just floating in space there. Come through at some point and add a bit of a drop shadow to make him look like he actually fits into the scene as he should. So it's just little things like that going through, playing around with it, seeing what you can get, seeing what type of results you guys can produce, and just generally working with it until you're happy with it. So good luck. As always, if you have any questions, shoot me an email, ask me in class, come and find me, and I'll see you guys next time. We'll get started on our collages.